Hello everyone, it is Miss O'Brien here, and I am here to talk a little bit more about rewriting trig expressions without fractions or not in fractional form. So in class yesterday we went over a few different ways to do this and did a few different examples. We had two tips to help us to get through this. The first tip was to get a difference of squares in the denominator, and the reason why we wanted to do that was because we wanted to be able to use a Pythagorean identity to simplify the denominator. So that's when we looked at the sine squared plus cosine squared equals 1 and rewrote that in a way that I could simplify it into the denominator. Now as we were doing this, I saw one student try a trick, and I realized, you know what, this trick seems to be one we can use all over the place. In fact, we could use them in all of our examples yesterday. And so I'm going to show you this trick today, too, in our example below. The trick is trying to move the denominator to the top by using an inverse trig function. So we're going to use this sample problem today. And before we get started, give it a shot by yourself. Press pause, give it a try, and then I'll show you how to do it on the next slide. Alright, so we're going to try it on this slide here. So I'm going to put the tips in the lower corner so we can reference them. And then our problem was 1 over 1 plus sine x. Alright, so now to get a difference of squares in the denominator, I'm going to need to multiply the denominator by 1 minus sine x. Now if you are wondering how I got this, it's because we're doing the reverse of what we did in class the other day. When we had to factor trig expressions, we would have something that was like, let's say x squared subtract y squared. We'd have a difference of squares, and then we know that the factors are x plus y and x minus y. So that's what we're doing here as well. But we don't want to change the value of the expression. So what we're going to do is multiply the top also by 1 minus sine x. I'm going to close parentheses, close parentheses. So now we have 1 minus sine x over 1 minus sine x, which is the same as 1. Alright, so I'm going to do that operation, and I get 1 minus sine x in my numerator. And in my denominator, I get 1 subtract sine squared x. Again, this is because we have a difference of squares. Now if you don't see that immediately, that's fine. You can also see how it multiplies out by doing the FOIL up here. So do this mentally along with me. So if I have my first terms, I've got 1 times 1 equals 1. Then I'm going to do my inner terms. So I've got sine x times 1, which is sine x, and negative sine x times 1, which is negative sine x. Those two will cancel. Then I have sine x times negative sine x, which gives me negative sine squared x, of course. So now I'm going to look. So we just did tip number 1. Next, let's try tip number 2. Try to use a Pythagorean identity to simplify the denominator. Now take a look at your Pythagorean identity sheets. You'll notice that only one of the Pythagorean identities is even looks like something we could use. Right? Only one of them has sine squared in there. So I'm going to show you how I rewrote that identity over on this side of the screen. So if our identity is sine squared x plus cosine squared x equals 1, I can subtract out sine squared x from both sides to get cosine squared x equals 1 minus sine squared x. Which is great because I can enter that right in there. So I'm going to plug that into my equation in the denominator. And I'm going to get 1 minus sine x in my numerator. Then in my denominator, I'm going to get cosine squared x. Alright, next I'm going to write this horizontally so we can take a look at how we can move it to the top using an inverse trig function. So right now, I have 1 minus sine x, and I can divide that by cosine squared x. That's the same thing as what's written above. But we know that if we divide by a fraction, and we can pretend like this is cosine squared x over 1, that means it's the same as multiplying by the reciprocal. So, well, we're going to take a little detour over here and multiply this by the reciprocal. So we've got 1 minus sine x times 1 over cosine squared x. Now we can look at our Pythagorean identity sheet, and we can see that 1 over cosine is the same thing as secant. So we can rewrite this right here as 1 minus sine x times secant squared x. And that is how we move the denominator to the top by using an inverse trig function. Here's our inverse trig function. So our final answer, no longer in fractional form, is this guy right here. So that is one way you can use these tips and tricks to solve these problems where we want to get them out of fractional form. So look back at your notes, see if you can figure out ways we can use that tip number 3 especially in our study of trig functions. Alright, that's all for now. Have a good day.